It's Hollie's Hotspurs, welcome back. Talking Tottenham every week, no better place to be sat. If it's a win, lose, draw, we'll be here for a chat. Best believe we tackle topics like Romero at the back. Heung-min Son, what can go wrong when he's on form? It's a dream come true, so sit back, relax and vibe with us. Special guests every time here to discuss. Bring your passion, come along for the ride, and don't forget to subscribe, cause...
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hollie's Hotspurs. Where's Hollie? She's not here. I'm Hollie today, although I don't sound or look like Hollie. You can call me Connie. No, don't call me Connie. Tonight, I am joined by Mitch. Mitch, how you doing? How you feeling? You've still gutted after the other night, honestly. Tell me.
Yeah, it's a tough one to get over, isn't it? Whenever you get knocked out of the cup, but. I guess the good thing about it is that we're playing again in a couple of days, so you can very quickly put it behind you and focus on what's in front of you. So I'm sure we'll find some positives to take from the little chat today and try and dress things up quite nicely, even though it was ultimately a pretty disappointing night for us on Friday. But hey ho.
100%. No, you're right. There's positives there. There always is. So first of all, let's pull apart where did it go wrong. You know, started straight away. You had Kulusevski back in after he was out for a little bit. There was a lot of hype for the game. You know, we're saying, oh, if we beat the best, we're gonna go all the way. We're gonna do this. You know, so to tell me where did it go wrong? Because you know, some would argue, did it go wrong from the start where Bob scored that goal that was disallowed? Did everything just go wrong there, or was it from kickoff? What's your take?
No, I don't. I don't think it was like that. I think having had a couple of days to reflect on it, my opinion shifted towards that initial sense of anger and frustration when you've just lost a big game, to reflecting upon it and thinking, well, at the end of the day, we've just lost to the treble winners, the current best team in Europe, a team that 9 times out of 10 you're probably going to lose to as well, a team that, as Ange alluded to, are 9 years into their project, and we're 6 months into our project, and they're a team that have got sensational world-class players in every position, and we're not at that level where ultimately we can compete with them yet. I know that it's a case of going into the game and thinking we're going to win, because every Spurs fan will. The record at home to Man City suggests that we were more than capable of beating them there. But it wasn't to be. I think it went wrong in the sense that we just didn't have enough going forward. I think, you know, we can sit here and say we were excellent at the back, because I think we were. It was really good to see that back four back again on home soil. Adogi, Van der Ven, Romero and Porro, brilliant to see. And I thought they all had a really good game, worked well as a unit. But at the other end of the pitch, you're playing with a front three of Werner, Richarlison and Brennan Johnson. There's just something missing, isn't there? If you want to beat a team like Manchester City, you need a top-class, if not a world-class striker in that front line. And when you're missing someone of the calibre of Heung-min Son, who you've got to remember is the captain as well and has a huge influence on the squad, it makes it 10 times more difficult. And I just think that is where things went wrong for us at the top end of the pitch rather than in defence.
100%. Yeah, I think a lot of people are underestimating, you know, that we are missing those players. And you're spot on. It's Man City at the end of the day. I know that they've come to us however many times, not only failed to win, failed to score, you know. So it's one of those things when you're missing that many players, you're missing your starting midfielders, you're missing Son, you know, it's a test. And like you say, with Maddison as well. So let's talk about Maddison. I mean, it was fantastic to have him back. Obviously, I mean, the reception when he come on was amazing, but obviously didn't, you know, as we spoke before, he didn't have the best game, probably because he wasn't particularly fit. But what's your take on it? I mean, because from my perspective after the game, I'd sat there and gone, it'd have been great to have him a bit longer. But as I reflected later on, I was like, no, he clearly wasn't ready for it, you know?
Yeah, look, I mean, James Maddison's a very delicate player, and he suffered with a fair few injuries throughout his career, some in important parts of his body, in his ankle and on his foot and other areas as well. So, you know, the manager knows better than anyone how ready they are to come into these sorts of games. And it was a really difficult one, I thought, for Ange, because on the one hand, it's a game that you do almost anything to win. I mean, you look at Man City drawing Luton in the next round, you think about Spurs in that position, okay, we can deal with that. There's a potential chance of getting yourself into the quarterfinals if you win that game. And once you're at that stage of the FA Cup, you're probably a team sitting there thinking, okay, let's win this now. But with James Maddison, when you've been out for what best part of 3 months, delicate injury, not had any experience back in a competitive environment in that time, it's difficult enough as it is to chuck him into a game against the best team in Europe. It might have been a little bit different if we were perhaps playing at home in a league game against, no offense to them, a team like Luton or a team that are sitting towards maybe the bottom half of the table, because he can come on and get a real feel for things. But the intensity and the level of fitness that's required to compete with Manchester City man for man is probably the highest that it can be when you're playing a game at that level. So to get 15 minutes out of him still wasn't, or 10 minutes out of him still wasn't the worst thing in the world. He wasn't particularly involved. As you said, he didn't have the greatest game. It's not too surprising. I know you've got the likes of De Bruyne on the other hand, who came back in and had an instant impact, and he was influential when he came on against us on Friday night as well. But it's just a difficult one, and you've got to consider that was De Bruyne's 3rd game back as well, coming off the bench in all 3 of them. So whether we're going to see a similar thing with Maddison, I'm not sure. But what you don't want is to rush him back in and then him get injured again, because all of a sudden he's missing for over half the season, 3/4 of the season. And I think it's safe to say that he's one of the best players at the club, and he's so key in our attacking play that we need to look after him. And there's a lot of football left to be played this season, and he'll be really important for us if we're going to try and get him to those Champions League spots. So yeah, even if he doesn't start against Brentford on Wednesday, it's not the end of the world. Give him a bit of time, and we want him back at his best, not strolling around the pitch sort of a bit half-arsing it because he's not too sure. It doesn't feel like he's fully fit yet. So I guess we just have to trust in Ange and see how we go over the next few games.
That's a good point. Do you think it's sustainable for us to, I mean, like you say, we don't want to rush him, but do you think it's sustainable for us to ease him in for too long? Because, you know, we can't hide the fact that Kulusevski really struggled out there in that role. You know, there was a comment there about Lo Celso. You know, Lo Celso was a big miss. Of course, having Maddison back there is a big miss, but and you know, you're going to have a bad game every now and then, but Kulusevski wasn't on it at all, really. So is it sustainable, not just against Brentford, but going forward, to not have him for that long? Like, yeah, what do you think in terms of, you know, like you say, we can't risk it, but at the same time, we need that option. So maybe it's a case of we bring him off the bench every couple of games. What's your thinking?
Yeah, so, well, the good news is that Lo Celso should hopefully be back for the Brentford game as well. So all of a sudden, you go from having to just have Kulusevski in that sort of number 10 role, in that central role, to having the possibility of one of Kulusevski, Lo Celso, or James Maddison in that role. So all of a sudden, you've got a lot of rotation and a lot of depth in that position, so you can manage the minutes of each of those players. You know, to be honest with you, Kulusevski probably needs a bloody rest because he's played a lot of football this season and he's had to fill in all over the pitch. I know he's a fit guy. He runs and runs. He's probably I'd say probably our fittest player because of the amount of running and the constant pressing he does. He just doesn't stop until the very end. He's probably tired as well, and maybe we just saw a little bit of that tiredness from him against Man City, especially in the middle. I actually thought in the second half when he shifted out to the right-hand side, he played a lot better. So I think it varies. It depends. I'm just trying to remember whether he played on the right in that draw against City earlier in the season, actually, because he looked a lot more effective.
Yeah, I think. Well, I don't know actually. Yeah, because you had the Brennan set him up for the goal, didn't he? But I don't know if he sort of drifted in later. I mean, he's done it earlier this season. He has performed in that role. But and I know, like you're saying, the intensity of City are a much harder team. You know, you're going to struggle if you're just putting him in there. It's going to be difficult. But yeah, I like you say, it's probably just a case of he needs a rest in reality, doesn't it? Yeah. It's so, and you know, we're starving a little bit, really. You know, we can see all sorts of fans going, you know, it's Brennan's fault, it's Werner's fault, it's Richie's fault, it's Kulusevski's fault. But in reality, when you are having to force players like Kulusevski back in, you are asking for that trouble in that sense. So, like you say, at the end of the day, we're missing Son, we're missing Maddison, we're missing all these players. So there is a positive. And back to the positive, we survived against City for 88 minutes. I know that they had the goal disallowed, but we defended absolutely superbly. So surely that's a massive positive in itself that we could hold them off for that long, despite their record anyway.
Yeah. Well, you've got to think now. Naturally, they're missing Erling Haaland, who is one of, if not the best strikers on the planet. We know that, but at the same time, we were still missing, you'd argue, 3 hugely influential players in Son, Basuma, and Sarr, who are unavailable. And then, of course, if Maddison's fit, he starts that game and probably has much more of an impact than he usually would. So it's a really difficult one, because it's very easy to sit here and say, well, if we had our best starting 11 out, we could well have won that game. Yeah, well, if you place best starting 11 v best starting 11, you'd probably still favour City to win the game, just because that's who they are. But you're right. There are a lot of positives to take out of the game, and yes, it didn't click in the final third, and yes, we struggled. And I just think players weren't making necessarily the right decisions going forward. I know we've mentioned him already, but Kulusevski in particular, I saw a lot of people talking about on social media with Timo Werner making a lot of good runs in the game, but nobody was ever really feeding him the ball and finding him. And I actually do think our most dangerous chance came from him on that side. So it was just one of those. And the other thing is, and I don't want to sound like I'm making excuses, because Man City are such an incredible team with an incredible manager, incredible players. But when you get the media attention of, oh, Man City are yet to win at Tottenham Hotspurs Stadium, they're yet to score a goal since it opened 2019. Now, obviously, we know that that's 5 years ago now. So it's a long old time. The new stadium's been open. So eventually, that sort of run is going to end and it's going to be broken. And the more that the media pick things like that up, I feel like the more it works against the team that are trying to protect that record, which, is why it's so difficult for a team to go on and win the Premier League title, because of how much attention you get. And it's why it's so difficult for teams to go unbeaten in competitions. Like, it puts into perspective how good you need to be to go undefeated throughout an entire league campaign, which is, we won't go into that. But it's just one of those. On another night, we might well have won that game. We might well have taken 1 or 2 of the chances we had. I know we only had like 1 or 2 shots on target, but we might have taken that on
one shot on target. That was exactly it.
Yeah. That's usually how it works against City for us, isn't it? We take our chances, but we didn't, and they got away with a bit of a fortunate / sloppy goal right at the end, and sometimes that's just football. And I think there was enough in the performance from the goalkeeper up to the final third to take as a positive, and hopefully with James Maddison possibly coming back into that starting 11 on Wednesday, we'll see a bit more going forward and a few more chances.
Yeah, 100%. You've mentioned the goal there, so we're a little bit early on it. What's your opinion on the goal? Because from my perspective, I don't, and it's hard to say as a Spurs fan, because you want to go, no, we were robbed, it wasn't right, But I compare that to the Burnley Luton one, and I know that this whole system is so inconsistent, and one week you'll have something happen, the next week you won't. There's no strategy with it at all. But that one in the Burnley versus Luton game, I thought that was worse, and the goal was given. So from my perspective, as rough as it is, I say it's a goal. But what do you think? Taking the Spurs hat off as a football fan, what was that?
So for me, I think when the goal went in, I didn't have too many complaints about it, because my impression was that Vicario just wasn't strong enough. And I also think that it was almost our fault that we weren't having any protection around the keeper, around Vicario, and City were doing it all game. They were putting a man on the goalkeeper for every single set piece. And when you've not got protection, and I think it was Ruben Diaz is all over him and hassling him and all of that. But if you think about what happens in those penalty box for set pieces, you think about defenders grabbing hold of each other, tugging each other, pulling each other down. How often do you see penalties given for that stuff? And the answer is not very often. And where the issue lies for me is consistency. Because if those sorts of fouls on the goalkeeper had not been given across the entire season, I'd hold my hands up and I'd go, okay, fine. Look, it's one of those. We should have protected the keeper a bit better, or Vicario should have been a bit stronger, should have got rid of the ball a bit better, whatever. But as you mentioned, you've seen softer ones given as fouls a lot this season, and you mentioned the example, the Burnley Luton one, and there have been loads. I think there was even another one that Man City were involved in. I can't remember if it was against Arsenal or whoever it was, but again, it's the lack of consistency. If you're going to give it in one game, you need to give it in the other. And I don't think that there's any excuses for the officials not to have conversations about this behind closed doors and agree, okay, let's look at this clip. Decide right there and then, is that a foul amongst yourselves? And then, okay, if this happens in games from now on, this is what we do. Because it seems to me like referees formulate their own opinions of things based on how they interpret the rules and the laws. And I don't think that should be the case. I think they should have to follow a strict line and everyone should have the same outlook on it. I feel like that's the job that Howard Webb is supposed to be doing and imposing on VAR and on these referees, but it isn't done. And you know, the referee debate could go on for hours and hours, and it will be revisited, I'm sure, so many times before the end of the season yet. But I saw an alternative angle of that foul, or the not foul on Vicario. And I think after watching that, I changed my opinion to thinking, no, that's not a foul, to thinking if the referee had given that as a foul, it wouldn't have been overturned. And if the referee didn't give it as a foul, it's not one that's going to be given as a foul. It's sort of in that grey area in the middle. So yeah, it was just disappointing to concede like that right at the end of the game. Yeah, just sort of killed everything a bit, and you do all that defensive work just for it to be undone by a sloppy goal from a corner like that. It's not great, is it?
It makes it more painful, doesn't it? Like you say, we defended so incredibly well, and for me, a standout always is Van der Ven. I still sit there and think, how have we pulled this guy off? He is so good, honestly. But yeah, but you're right with the consistency as well. I think the issue, and you're saying as well, you know, from my perspective, the English game generates so much revenue. It wouldn't be hard to invest a little bit of money to take them all on a little training course, so they're all on the same level in terms of what a decision like that would be. And of course, you're going to have, you know, a lot of opinions are subjective and refs are different. But if this is always happening where 1 week it is, 1 week it isn't, the game's never going to change, is it? You know, it's just, and it's not really fair in that sense. But you know, it is what it is. It's we can't help that, can we? In that sense. So I'm going to ask you the big question that you probably see quite a lot on Twitter at the minute, which is Brennan Johnson. There is a lot of I don't want to say animosity, but there's a lot of questioning about you know, his effort, if he's good enough, what the plan is going forward. Obviously, you saw about Noosa recently as well, about what happened there. That fell through. What's your opinion on Johnson? Do you think he's fairly getting criticised? Do you think he's fairly criticised based on the other day? Because from my perspective, no one in that front three, particularly, well, front four, if you count Kulusevski in the middle, shone. So is it fair that he's consistently getting barraged with this, you know, even having to limit his Instagram comments, or is it fair enough that, because you can criticize a player, but there's criticizing and there's a different level to it. So what's your
I think people are incredibly harsh on the poor kid. He's been at the club for half a season, and if we're honest with ourselves, he wasn't brought in to be an immediate starter. If you think about what Tottenham's best front three is, if everyone's fit, because Maddison would be playing in that number 10 advanced role, you would have Son right now, because Richarlison, I would say, is on good form. You'd probably have Son, Richarlison, Kulusevski as your front three, right? Brennan Johnson doesn't fit into that line as a starter if everyone's fit. Now, obviously, with the Maddison injury, he's had to start games. And undoubtedly, the jump up, particularly in expectations from Nottingham Forest to Spurs, is huge. The change of scenery is huge. The scope of everything is huge. The pressure is a lot more because of what Spurs aim to compete for season in, season out. So I really, really like him. And I think that he has got a lot of raw talent. And I think where his issues lie, I think are just traits that can be coached. And I think there are areas of his game that can be improved with time and with the right guidance from the training staff and from the manager. You have to give players time. Heung-min Son came in and his first season was very, very similar to what Brennan Johnson's having now. And look at him, it's the same with so many players. Harry Kane took years to break into the first team. He took failed loan spells. We nearly sold him. Gareth Bale wasn't an immediate success either. You have to give players time to settle in. They are human beings. If you left your job, whatever it may be, you move to a completely different area of the country. You got a new house. You don't have, the same people around you. You might not have your family around you. You've got to meet all of these people. And then on top of that, you've got the pressure of, if you put it into a business perspective, of delivering a huge pitch that is expected to significantly increase a company's sales or contacts or something like that. That's a lot to handle and a lot to deal with. And I know we're talking about elite athletes who get paid thousands and thousands of pounds. So you can argue this is something that they should be able to do, but it's not always that straightforward. And with Brennan Johnson, I think we've already seen glimpses of how good of a player he can be when he makes the right decision, but he's still an incredibly young player. He probably isn't fully developed in terms of reading the game and how he should move forward just yet. So we have to give him time. For me, the frustrations come with people saying that he shouldn't even be at the club. We should be selling him already. I just think reactionary posts like that, half of them are to get engagements online anyway. And the other half of that are people that are very reactionary fans that I think just, like a lot of people, are fed up with things not necessarily going Tottenham's way. And it's very, very easy to create a scapegoat. Brennan Johnson wasn't the only player to have a poor game against City. And do you know what the other thing is? And I compare it because it just popped into my head. The other person that got a lot of stick from Friday was Højbjerg.
Yes.
And the reason for that is because of two mistakes that he made towards the end of the game. And yes, they were very animated mistakes, one that nearly cost us a goal and another one where he completely went to clear the ball and missed it. Fine, I get that. But for 88 minutes of that game, I actually thought Højbjerg played well. But because of those two little errors that ultimately didn't cost us anything, people jump on it and they slate him. Oh, Højbjerg's so crap. He gets away with murder. He shouldn't be at the club. And people are doing the same with Brennan Johnson. And it's just not... Look, I'm just trying to create a positive culture and a culture that where fans get behind the players. So it's just frustrating and a bit sad to see, because at the end of the day, the direction that we're going in under the current management is positive. And Brennan Johnson is going to be at this club for a long time. And this is my opinion. He signed, a 6-year deal. I think he's shown enough and will have shown enough already to warrant the money that we paid for him, in terms of the fact that there's a player there that can be developed and improved. But it just might take a couple of seasons. It happens with some players. It just does. So, yeah, it gets at me a little bit, because it's just not nice to see. And there's a lot worse players at the club that you can chuck your criticisms on and be nasty to. The fact that he had to limit his Instagram comments is ridiculous. You don't go onto someone's profile and start hurling abuse at them there. It's just ridiculous. If you have your opinions, fine, put them out on the web. And if it's just on your Twitter account or whatever it is and you tweet it out because that's your opinion, fine. But don't go onto his Instagram comments and telling him he's shit and that you should be leaving the club and stuff, because that's just nasty and bitter. But yeah, that's just my opinion. I don't know.
No, you're right. I agree. It's not a good reflection of fans of our club either. And I know, there are a lot of fans that would say they are not fans of our club. Those people who comment on his post and say those things. People will have different views on that. But yeah, I agree. It's not fair. And like you say, he's been playing in such a disjointed team since he's arrived. In an ideal world, he might not be starting every week. That's fine. That's a reality. But there is a level to it. There's only so much you can expect from a player when he first comes in. The big point for me is he's an Ange signing. Ange signed him. Like, it's not, you know, people can say what they want about Gill and, you know, I mean, Eric Dyer's gone now, and Rode, all these players that we've had that we consider maybe not good enough. But at the end of the day, he's an Ange signing. He's shown little glimpses. He does not deserve that treatment at all, and it is not a good reflection of this fan base whatsoever. So it's one of those things. We'll go back onto Højbjerg, because for me, for those 80 minutes before he'd sort of made those two mistakes, I thought he was one of the better players on the pitch. Now, I could well be wrong with that, but I thought he did a very decent job. Of course, he's the most frustrating footballer when it comes to passing the ball. His pass accuracy is usually insanely low. But he did a job. He stepped in. You know, we are missing Sarr and Basuma. In an ideal world, he probably wouldn't be starting. What's your take on that? And we're going to allude to the fact that he has basically made it clear he's staying for the rest of the season. So what's your thoughts on that? Are you happy with that? Do you think he played okay? You know, like you're saying, we got Sarr and Basuma back. Obviously, you got Skip as the other option as well. You got Bentancur in there as well. What do you think? Do you think that's a good move for us, or do you think it's another, oh, he's just someone who's on the books, he needs to go?
Yeah, I think he was fine against City. Again, it's like it's one of those where it's almost a bit jumping on the bandwagon because you can, and because he's a player that gets targeted a lot anyway. I think he was fine. Yes, he wasn't perfect, but you know, you can't be perfect all the time in a game of football at that level, and especially when you're trying to make things happen. Sometimes it takes a bit of magic and about a bit of real quality to unlock a defense like Man City have got. And you know, I personally don't have a problem with trying things. If he's going to try and play those difficult passes, those diagonal balls, and if they don't come off all the time, then fine. I'm not saying that he's the best player in the world, because I don't think that he is. I think that he shouldn't be anywhere near our starting 11, because we have much better players in that position. But would I start him over Oliver Skip? Yes, I probably would, because I think that he has a bit more technical quality and assists us going forward. Obviously, you balance that out with the fact that Oliver Skip can probably do a bit of a better job defensively. But you know, that's an argument for another day. In terms of him staying at the club, I don't blame him for rejecting advances from Lyon. Lyon have been really poor this season. I think they're right down near the relegation zone in the French division. So I don't blame him for saying no to that. I can't imagine he wants to go to France either. I would hazard a guess that he wants to go abroad, but it will probably be one of the three of Germany, Spain, or Italy. I just think that France might not be a country that necessarily entices him at this stage of his career, especially with him having been linked with Juventus over in Serie A as well. So I think he's just being patient. He's waiting, and he will leave in the summer. I can't see him staying beyond the summer. He'll have a lot more options, I would imagine, as well. And our asking price might come down for him at the same time. So, look, I'm not upset about it. It felt like there could possibly have been an opportunity there, because if his departure meant that we did bring another midfielder in before the transfer window closes, then of course I'd be all over that. I'd be up for it. I'd love to see us bring in a new midfielder, a new face to slot in there. But I think we have to be a bit realistic with the fact that it's very difficult to do business in January. And we've addressed the area that we needed to most, which is getting some centre-back depth. And we've brought in another attacker, albeit on loan, in a relatively risk-free deal. But as a backup player and as someone that can be brought off the bench towards the latter stages of games, I absolutely don't have any problems with Højbjerg being in the squad for that purpose. When Sarr and Basuma come back, and then you've got Lo Celso available and Madison, that is likely the role that Højbjerg is going to play now, because we've only got those one a week Premier League games to focus on. But you know, if he goes in the summer for 25 million quid, then that's absolutely fine with me. It's just, yeah, it's a shame, because when we signed him, I thought he was going to sort of blossom into a really, really good player, because he was good at Southampton. He was all right. He was obviously their captain before he declared that he wanted to leave. We got a relatively decent deal for him, if you include the money that was knocked off through Kyle Walker-Peters. But there's a player there that is capable. and whether you like him and whether you think he's a good footballer, he's a Premier League standard player. He's that level. Whether he's a top 4 player, I'm not sure. But you know, he will be here till the end of the season. It doesn't upset me massively. I would have liked to have seen us bring in another midfielder, but you know, it's 5-6 months. It's not going to make a massive amount of difference considering we've only got one competition to play for, and it's going to be very, very difficult to win that, isn't it? So.
Exactly. No, yeah, for me, he does the job. You know, like you say, you've got to be realistic with January, hasn't you? It's we got the centre back, we got the attacker we needed. You know, maybe fans are expecting a little. Well, I don't know. I don't want to say fans are expecting a little bit too much. You want to be ambitious. You want to see more from your team, but you got to be real and know that for someone like Højbjerg, he might have to be a bit part player for the rest of the season. When you got your starting team back, it's not going to be a problem. So it's one of those things. Right. Well, in that sense, then we'll wrap it up more towards Brentford. Looking forwards, you know, what are we thinking? How are we feeling? You know, obviously we spoke before this. Tony's back. It's a massive game for us because it's the only thing we are really sort of in now. What's your opinion for that? You know, do you think he's going to change the starting lineup? What's your thinking?
I think Maddison will come in.
There you go.
I think Madders will come in and start. I think that will be the big thing for us. I think Ange will have, you know, he's had a couple of weeks training with us now, Madders, since coming back, and I think Ange will have looked at the game on Friday night against City and be aware that we were really struggling going forward. And the good news, hopefully, unless things change and he tells us tomorrow in his press conference that Lo Celso isn't back yet, you know, which he might do, then Madders doesn't even have to play the full 90 as well, even if he gets, you know, 45 or 60 minutes in the tank on Wednesday night. But, you know, you're at home at Brentford. Spurs will, of course, be heavy favourites, and it's a game that every Spurs fan will be expecting to win. It's not going to be that easy, though. Undoubtedly, Tony being back's a huge boost for them. He made a difference against Forest in that game a couple of weeks ago, and he will make a difference against us if we let him. I do feel confident with that back four that we have back now that we can deal with him and we are capable of handling him and his skill. But yeah, we just need to be a little bit careful, don't we? We want to do the best that we can. What is it? 17 games left this season. I just want to win as many of them as possible. And I'd love to win every single home game between now and the end of the season and just make this place a real fortress under Ange and just make it so tough for teams to come here. I just want to see us hammer a few teams that come and play. And Thomas Frank loves playing his expansive football as well. So hopefully it works in our favour. And I'll be disappointed if we don't win that one. Just say that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we've got to come away realistically winning that one, despite the fact Tony is back. I like what you say about the home record. You know, it'd be great to get some nice revenge on City as well. You know, I mean, maybe we can keep that record of them not scoring against us in the league or getting a result against us in the league. So, ready to be upbeat with that in that sense. What's your prediction going forward for the season? Do you think we get top four, or do you think we? I don't know, because from my perspective, I looked at the season and I said, if we finish top 6, Ange's first season, no one knows what's going to happen. I would be okay with that. You know, what's your thinking?
Yeah. Well, a lot of it will depend, of course, on whether that 5th spot this season gets you a place in the Champions League. Because if that is confirmed and that is the case, then yes, I would back us to get into the Champions League, even if it means we finish 5th. I just think Liverpool and City, you just got to think about it logically. Liverpool and City are naturally going to occupy 2 of those top 4 spots. Arsenal will be there or thereabouts. They've looked a bit ropey over the last few months, but inevitably they still have that squad and experience to, you'd think, be comfortably in that top 4. So then you've got Villa and Spurs and United and Brighton and West Ham. I think those are the 5 teams that are in the mix for those last couple of spots. It'll be tough. I think Villa will have a bit of a drop off towards the end of the season, especially with them probably going all out for the Conference League as well, and quite possibly the FA Cup if they beat Chelsea in the replay. I think they've got quite a kind draw at home in the 5th round, so there's another competition they could go for there as well. So I think their league form will suffer a little bit, just consistency with teams as well. It's very difficult to keep up the form that they've had for the entire season, especially when you've not necessarily done it before. Brighton is one to watch, in my opinion, because they're getting a lot of their players back very soon that have been missing for a long time. And Matoma and Fati and Adingra, they're very, very good players that they've been missing a while, similar to us. I'm expecting us to really improve now that we've got these players back, and especially when the AFCON guys come back and Son comes back from the Asian Cup. I'm really, really looking forward to seeing that start 11 that we haven't seen since we went on that 10-game undefeated streak at the start of the season. I want to see that again, and I'm really hoping that it helps us finish the season strongly. It's really difficult because I want to base us off that first 10-game period, and if I did, I would say we are definitely in the top 4 best teams in the country, but that's not how it works. There's no guarantees that people aren't going to get injured again in the second half of the season. Having said that, I'd be very, very disappointed if we didn't at least get into the Europa League. I think this season, that's the one for me. We need to get back into European football at least next season, and there's no excuses now. We're out all cup competitions for us not to do that, and I'm hopeful of Champions League ambitions. I'm hopeful, and I think we're capable of being able to do it as well.
100%, and I think that's slightly ahead of expectations, at least from my perspective. Like I say, went into the season not expecting that, and if we do that, you know, it's not the worst thing in the world that we pull that off. You know, people are a bit gutted about the FA Cup, but well, we're all gutted about the FA Cup. We're all gutted about another just 16 years now without a trophy. It's frustrating, but you know, we'll be optimistic. We're gonna have the players back. Let's have a long run for the rest of the season, hopefully positive, and go from there. But fantastic. Well, thanks, Mitch, for joining me on this Connie's Hotspurs. No, we're not calling it that ever again. I never said that. Mitch, can you let everyone know where they can find you, please? That was brilliant. Thank you.
Yes, over on Twitter /X at Mitch_Fretton, and I have a YouTube channel as well that I'm sort of trying to pick up and trying to film some content for at points and build that. So if you fancy subscribing over there, that'd be great as well. And big thank you to you as well, Connie. You've been a brilliant host, mate, and kept the conversation going nicely. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Is it the same handle on YouTube as well, Mitch Fretton?
It is, yes, it is.
Perfect. I'll plug myself quickly. Connor, CC's Clavignon on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, make silly videos. Don't usually host things like this, so yeah, but it's been great. And yeah, just everyone, let's be positive. There's so much more positivity to come in this team, you know. So like I say, let's have a good run for the rest of the season, and we'll have a big summer, and then next season, who knows, you know. But thanks for joining us on this Hollie's Hotspurs, and come on you Spurs.